Stagecoach had got its numbers wrong, according to the Transport Secretary. Chris Grayling was in the Commons to announce the Stagecoach is to lose the East Coast Mainline rail franchise within months because its financial position is much worse than had been thought. The route, which runs from London to Edinburgh, is 90% owned by Stagecoach and 10% is owned by Virgin. Mr Grayling said he was urgently seeking a successor, but the other option was for the route to be brought back under government control. I put to him that Stagecoach was leaving both himself and the taxpayer to clear up the mess.
Well, it's clearly a headache from my point of view. I wish this hadn't happened, but the key thing is that I have to take steps now that will protect the passenger, protect the taxpayer, and most particularly keep the railway working. I mean, on a day-to-day basis, this railway is working well. It's got some reliability problems because the trains are old and new trains are coming shortly, but it's raised performance in the last couple of years. What's gone wrong is that the parent company got its sums wrong, bid too much, and it's now paying the taxpayer out of its own money for the premium it said it would pay to us all, and it's run out of cash.
How are the company's directors being affected by all of this?
Well, of course, the directors of the business, this is not a case where I imagine they're going to be walking away with big bonuses because they've lost money. I mean, the taxpayers received all the money that we were promised up to now. Nearly £1 billion has been paid in premiums, but because the company's had to pay some of that out of its own pocket, there hasn't been enough money coming in from the fare payer to pay the bill to the taxpayer. The result is the company's been losing money steadily.
And you're sure about that, are you? Because Tom Brake, the Liberal Democrats transport spokesman, said you didn't know if the directors had received any bonuses for the East Coast franchise.
Well, if the directors receive bonuses, there's something wrong at the company concerned, and it's coming from their own funds. The taxpayer's not paying for any bonuses in this, just the opposite.
If then you share those concerns about what's gone on, why is Stagecoach remaining on the shortlist to run the East Midlands franchise?
So the issue is very straightforward, that the company has fulfilled its contract with the government in full. It's paid all the money it promised to pay us up to now. It's forfeited the bond payment, the parent company guarantee that it said that it would put in. Basically, the plan has always been, the way this works is that the company bids and it says, in the event of us not being able to fulfill our obligations, we'll put some of our own money on the table, parent company guarantee that we will lose if we don't deliver. All of that's been done. Fully, every last bit of the contract will have been fulfilled. I therefore don't have a legal basis to say you can never bid again.
You must be quite concerned. There's the legal issue, but there's a moral and indeed a political cost to all of this, isn't there? The appearance is certainly one of a company that hasn't fulfilled its contract and is kind of getting away with it.
Well, no, the reality is this is a company that's come in, that's run the railway better, that's improved passenger satisfaction, that's employing more staff and running more trains. I don't have a problem with the team who are running this railway on a day-by-day basis. They've actually done a pretty good job at a time when the trains are unreliable because they're about to be phased out and go to the scrapyard. But what I have a problem with is the parent company overbidding. That's caused me a major headache. I'm not happy about that. I'm putting in place measures to ensure that we can't actually have overbidding like this again. But do I want to say to a big British company, you can never bid for a contract in this company again? You can't learn the lesson of your mistake. Legally, I can't do that, and I'm not actually sure it's the right thing to do.
Labour, as you know, have a policy of suggesting that perhaps the trains should be nationalised. Does this kind of chaos play into that narrative? It makes passengers and indeed the taxpaying public think actually the companies that run these franchises simply aren't fit to do so.
Well, my message to the travelling public is you watch all around the country over the next 12 to 18 months, some already. There are new trains appearing all across the country. Those new trains are being paid for by private companies. If those private companies weren't there, it would be a matter of do we want to spend the money on the NHS or on education or on trains? And what happened in the days of British Rail and the bad old days of nationalisation was the trains always lost out. So those new trains are because we've got a private railway. They wouldn't be happening otherwise.
However, you yourself have said that the alternative option for the East Coast franchise is for it to be directly operated by the Department of Transport through an operator of last resort. So you too recognise that actually the government may have to intervene?
Well, we may have to intervene for an interim period, yes, but my plan post-2020 is very different. We are going to create the first regional rail operation, integrated, running track and train, that this company has seen since before the days of British Rail. People don't really understand why we run the track and the train separately in this country. What we're doing now is working to bring the two back together again, and the East Coast partnership, the successor to where we are today, is going to be a proper partnership between the public and private sector. It's going to operate the tracks and the trains, and it's going to be a joined-up railway of the kind people want.
But even so, you recognise that there are times when the Department of Transport has to intervene in a service that is clearly essential.
Well, I mean, our job is to make sure the trains keep running, because that matters fundamentally to the travelling public, and we'll always take the best decision that ensures that happens.
Chris Grayling there. Well, Christian Wolmar is a transport author and journalist and a former Labour Party parliamentary candidate. He joins me now. Good evening.
Good evening.
We heard there the Transport Secretary giving his view of why the East Coast Main Line had got into this situation. Why do you think it's on the brink of collapse?
Well, it's basically the structure of the franchising process. The private companies are basically taking a bet on how many passengers are going to use the line over the space of the contract, which is 7 or 10 years. And that's really a bet that the private sector is ill-suited to make. You know, there's so many factors. In this case, it was the terrorism attacks in London, the poorly performing economy, various other factors that led to a slower growth than expected, and therefore that's why Stagecoach got into trouble. It's the franchising process that's
If the private sector's poorly equipped to make those decisions, why would the government be any better to do so?
Well, they wouldn't, but they would take the risk of the railways. The railways are a public service that are absolutely essential for the economy of the country and for all sorts of social needs. In the old days, that was recognised in terms of having a nationalised company, and that should be recognised again. There is no point having these private sector companies in if, when they make profits and they do well, then they're left alone, and yet when they start making losses, they have to be bailed out.
You heard Chris Grayling there, though, say that in this instance, the team running the franchise have raised the performance. The parent company just bid wrongly. He pointed to the new trains going out across the rail system more generally. And Virgin and Stagecoach are expected to lose about £165 million on the East Coast. So failure like this isn't without its costs either.
No, and the point is that over the 20-odd years that there's been franchising, there's been some good companies who've done possibly better than British Rail might have done, and there's some companies that have done worse than British Rail might have done. But there's still no real explanation for what benefit do we get from private companies being involved in an industry where they know it can't fail. The services are never going to stop if the company goes bust. All that happens is that they throw the towel in, lose some money, and then we have the whole process of having to start again. This has happened 3 times on the East Coast that companies have actually failed to guess right. So what's the point? Why not just do what Lord Adonis did when he was Transport Secretary and just took it back in-house? And indeed, Chris Grayling is even thinking of doing that.
And would you suggest then that that's the appropriate action for the entire rail system?
Yes. I mean, I've never been able to find out what franchising is for, and it's something I've written a lot about. Why do we try to place a risk on the private sector that they're unable to take? They can't guess future numbers. The service has to keep running. So why should they profit if they happen to make a good guess and lose money if they happen to make a bad guess? There's no science about this. It's guesswork.
Christian Wolmar, thank you very much.